Hey everyone, Steven here, and today I'm reviewing the Samsung Odyssey Neo G7 43-inch monitor. The Odyssey monitors from Samsung have been some of my most popular videos on the channel, and there always seems to be a big draw towards these for good reason. I think Samsung has been one of the first companies to the market with certain features like the 1000R curve, and that paired with the unique aesthetics of the Odyssey series make it very appealing. This monitor is very different compared to the rest of the Odyssey lineup though, as it has smart TV features, which makes it feel more like a TV than a monitor in some regards. But before I get into the good and bad here, let's take a look at the specs, the smart features, and panel settings. The Neo G7 43-inch monitor is a 4K flat VA panel monitor with a matte finish, a 144Hz refresh rate, a 1 millisecond MPRT or motion picture response time, certified VESA HDR 600, 1196 local dimming zones, quantum matrix technology, and AMD FreeSync Premium Pro. The typical brightness is 400 nits with a minimum of 300 nits, and this covers 95% of the DCI P3 color gamut. The static contrast ratio is 4250 to 1, with a dynamic contrast ratio of 1,000,000 to 1. For ports, this has a DP 1.4 port, 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, 2 USB 3.0 ports, an Ethernet port, and an audio input. Inside of the box, you'll find the monitor, stand, DP cable, USB expansion cable, remote control, and user manual. For physical adjustments, this can tilt 2 degrees forwards and 20 degrees backwards. This can also tilt side to side. Samsung doesn't list degrees with the side to side tilt, but it does look to just be a couple of degrees. Next, the speakers here, I wasn't able to find any information on the Samsung spec sheet for this. Online, I found one website that said that these are 20-watt speakers, but I have no way to confirm that, unfortunately. So I usually do a sound test. What I can tell you is they get really loud, so I won't be able to do that just because as far as how loud these get, it's not going to come through, and also you're not going to get a really good gauge on the quality of the audio through that. Last, the list price here is $999, so $1,000 with this, but I've seen frequent sales, and I actually got mine for $800, but I have seen this as low as $700. Moving on to the panel settings, there is far too much for me to cover in an extreme amount of detail, but I do want to cover as much as I can. If you're using a PC or console, you long press the play/pause button on the remote, and it will bring up the game bar at the bottom for quick adjustments. This also pops up every time you start up a console or PC, which kind of gets annoying over time. Here you have the response time first, which is standard, faster, and extreme. I'll get into the response time in more depth in a little bit, but do keep in mind extreme will dim the monitor quite a bit. Next, you have the game picture presets, which has standard, RPG, which I've personally been using for the gameplay featured in this entire video, RTS, FPS, sports, and custom. None of these outside of RPG look that great right now because I haven't calibrated any of them, which takes a lot of time to do. In fact, this monitor has taken the longest out of any monitor I've reviewed to calibrate. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a little bit, but I did want to get that out of the way now. After the picture presets, you have the ultra-wide game view, which shifts this from the 16:9 aspect ratio to a 21:9 aspect ratio, which on the previous monitors I reviewed, they've had this feature. It never made sense to me because they're smaller monitors, so when you do shift to that, it makes it too small. But on this larger monitor, it does make more sense, and it is something that I think is more usable. Now this ends up being a 40-inch ultra wide, and at the current overall height of the monitor, it fits nicely in the middle of your viewing angle and not lower like other smaller monitors can. I think this is a nice touch here and something I would actually use when gaming. You can also scale this in size depending on the game, so it could be a more narrow resolution if you wanted it to be. Doom Eternal only let me use a 2560 by 1080p resolution for some reason, but Horizon Zero Dawn let me have access to a larger selection. With this though, I did notice at higher 144Hz refresh rates, my camera actually picks up on a strobing effect with the monitor. Now in person, my eye can't see this, but I'm wondering if the 144Hz is really just overclocking from 120 Hz, as it doesn't appear to happen at 120 Hz. So I've reduced the refresh rate on PC games to avoid this issue right now because it doesn't look great on my camera, even with adjustments to my camera settings. Moving on though, after the ultra wide setting, you have the virtual aim point, which you can turn on or off, and you have the option to change the color, and there is one other variation in the custom tab for this. You can also change the position of this if you want. I do want to note that the bottom of the game menu here lets you know the FPS, if HDR is on or off, and if variable refresh rate is on or off. Moving on to the rest of the settings, you will be brought to the game tab first. Here you can turn the game mode on or off, which optimizes your screen to improve performance when using a game console. Next, you can adjust the response time again or the virtual aim, which are the same as the previous game bar menu. After that, you have core lighting, which is the light strips you find on the bottom left and right hand side of the monitor. I currently have core lighting on, which mimics colors on the screen, but turning that off, you can adjust the lighting effect between static, rainbow, flash, double flash, and breathing. You can also turn these lights off if you want, and this has a large palette of colors to choose from for these various lighting effects. After that, you have the dynamic black equalizer, which improves black detail and clarity. Game Motion Plus is after that, which enhances screen smoothness to optimize fast-moving games such as RPG and adventure games. I'm surprised they mentioned those styles of games and not first-person shooters, but for this to be active, you have to have variable refresh rate or FreeSync turned off from all sources. Next, you have HDR tone mapping, which gives you two options, HDR 10 Plus Gaming or Game HDR. HDR 10 Plus Gaming has three options: Basic, which provides the most accurate representation of the game's original creative intent, and Advanced, which provides enhanced representation of game context to maximize visual impact. The Game HDR option is under that. That is the third option for HDR 10 Plus Gaming, and with that one, it sets the optimal image quality for HDR games according to the content's brightness information, and this you can turn on or off. Now, all of these adjustments seem to be hard to capture on my camera because they seem to be very subtle, but it is more noticeable in person. So that's going to be the last option on the game tab. Above that, you have the connection tab, which has your device name, network settings, external device manager, and Apple AirPlay settings. Next, you have the sound tab, with the sound output option being first. You can choose the monitor speakers or choose to connect this to Bluetooth speakers. Under that, you have sound mode, which is only available if game mode is turned off. This only has two options though, standard and amplify. Next, you have intelligent sound mode, which can improve your sound experience by recognizing your content, usage patterns, and the environment around your smart monitor. Clicking on this, you'll find that you have three different options: active voice amplifier, adaptive sound plus, and adaptive volume. For adaptive voice amplifier, this analyzes noise in real time while you're watching the smart monitor so that voice audio can always be heard clearly. With the Adaptive Sound Plus, this analyzes audio content and space around the smart monitor in real time to deliver an optimized viewing experience with stunning sound in any situation. And last is Adaptive Volume, which automatically adjusts the volume based on your usage patterns and audio input. Below the intelligent sound mode, you have Wi-Fi speaker setup and adjustments. I don't have Wi-Fi speakers, so I couldn't take a look at these options, unfortunately. Last, you have the expert settings, which includes balance, equalizer, digital output format, Dolby Atmos, which will only work with content that actually has that feature, auto volume, sound feedback, and reset sound. Next is the picture tab, and here you have the picture mode first, which you can't change in game mode, but with that turned off, you have two options here for PC and consoles, which is graphic and entertainment. For regular TV, you can change this between dynamic, standard, and movie calibrated. Under that, you have the picture size settings, which I wasn't able to change at all when using a PC, which kind of makes sense since I can adjust that through the PC display tab, but it also doesn't work for consoles either. And that is something where the consoles don't have native 21:9 aspect ratio, so it's not something that you would typically use because it's just going to stretch out the image if you did stretch it to the 21:9 aspect ratio. And then for TV shows, I actually couldn't get it to work either. So it seems like it's made for something very, very specific. I just don't know what the input would be in order to actually take advantage of this. Next, you have eye care, which has adaptive picture, which adjusts the brightness based on the lighting in the room. It's hard to show this on camera, and honestly, I didn't notice a difference at all with this on or off when testing it. Next, you have eye saver mode, which you can turn it to off, low, or high. This is to help reduce blue light, and I've personally never liked these modes on any monitor. I'd rather just wear blue light filter glasses, as they are always just too yellow orangish when I turn these on for my liking. Last in the picture tab is the expert settings, and this has a lot of settings that you can adjust. You have brightness, contrast, sharpness, color, and tint for your more general settings. After that, you have apply picture settings, which this just seems to take any of the settings that you're doing and make it global. So any settings that you adjust, it's going to apply it to whether it's the PC, the live streaming TV, or consoles, anything like that, taking these settings and just applying it to that. And then you have picture clarity settings. And both of these, by the way, you can't turn these on if game mode is on, but picture clarity settings, with this one, it enhances picture sharpness to optimize the TV for fast moving images. So you get the picture clarity, judder reduction, LED clear motion, and noise reduction. Next is local dimming, which let's pause here for a second, as you have off, standard, low, and high. And this is really hard to pick up on my camera, but I'm going to try my best to kind of show these off. I do want to point out that the local dimming zones here, it's not mentioned in the specs. So I had to reach out to Samsung, and they let me know that this does have 1196 local dimming zones, which is the same that you find on the 32-inch version of the Neo G7. I'm not sure why they don't put that in the spec information, but again, you do have 1196 here. So you've taken the 4K resolution and the amount of local dimming zones, you've stretched that out. So essentially the pixels per inch go down, and the amount of density that you would get out of that 1196 local dimming zones, it's been spread thinner just because this is a much larger screen. So to me, it doesn't look quite as good as the Neo G7 32-inch version. But trying to showcase it, it is still decent, I will say that, but it's not going to touch an OLED, which essentially, because each individual pixel is backlit, it's an incredibly high amount of local dimming zones technically. Again, each pixel is backlit, so the amount of pixels that you would have on that screen, which could be in the millions, that's as many local dimming zones as you have. Again, compared to the 1196 here, there is a very stark difference between the two. Moving on though, after that you have contrast enhance, which has off, low, and high. Again, I'll try to showcase this on screen, but it will definitely look more pronounced in person. Next is color tone, which has cool, standard, warm 1, warm 2, and natural. White balance is after that, which has 2-point and 20-point options. I could never get the 20-point option to become available, but with 2-point, I'll just showcase the screenshot of the adjustments this has because it's quite a lot here. After this, you have a gamma, which is straightforward, shadow detail, which has a sliding scale and increases details with shadows, Next is color space, which this opens up a whole new tab where you can choose various settings and presets for the color space you want to use. I really just left this alone and haven't opened up Pandora's box on this one, as there are plenty of settings to adjust already, on top of changing the color space and starting that process with the adjustments with everything else all over again. Next is smart calibration, which doesn't work on PC for some reason and only works for TV and consoles. And last, you have variable refresh rate, and you can turn this on or off. Moving on, let's cover the smart features here. And when you first set this up, it will prompt you to download the Samsung app and configure the TV, which takes about 5 to 10 minutes. After the TV is set up, you will come to the home page, and this will look very familiar to other home screens on smart TVs. This allows you to choose any apps you want to start with the first row. Under that is any previous app you've used in order of when they were last used, and below this you have a long list of various free movies and TV shows that you can choose from. This to me is a big draw, as the free TV portion here has over 500 channels, so basic cable here is free. Now this is also free with my TCL TVs in the house, but this isn't a feature my normal monitors have. So for anyone that uses their monitor as a TV in a dorm room or a game room, then this will be great for you, as it has more options than just a basic monitor. After this main home page here, you have the game tab, which is a showcase of the various game features this has in its own interface, much like a TV section. Here you can connect a controller to this and navigate the TV with that controller, which is pretty cool. You can also play games through this as long as you have the needed requirements for it, such as Destiny 2 needing the NVIDIA GeForce and Microsoft games needing a Game Pass. Now, if you're streaming in a game, obviously you're going to need an internet connection, and with that, the Ethernet port on the TV will be the best way to take advantage of this so that you prevent any lag. I'm not personally a big proponent of streaming games to devices like this, but having the options for people that want to do it here is really nice. Just keep in mind that you will need a very good internet connection, and I haven't seen any streaming experience that was seamless 100% of the time, so you will most likely experience issues at some point. If you really want to see me cover that though, let me know in the comment section and I'll make a separate video testing these features out with various games. Next, I want to cover the picture-in-picture feature. This has built into it that actually works with consoles and TV, but I wasn't able to get this to work with a PC and TV or a console, unfortunately. So this allows you to do side-by-side picture with the aspect ratio changing and it being the same side as the ultra-wide option for PC, or you can have a smaller picture in any of the corners. You can swap the source between these two, and here you could do picture-in-picture for TV as well. My first thought was for gamers that want to keep tabs on a game or event while still gaming, or someone wanting to watch one particular football game, for example, while keeping tabs on another one. It's not a feature I would personally use, but again, the large amount of options here is really nice to see. Now, quick side note about using the consoles, I didn't notice a drop in performance with any of these combinations that you can do with the picture-in-picture or picture-by-picture, and I have this set to performance, so it should be aiming for the 120 Hertz. And I didn't notice a drop in performance, but I don't have a way to confirm that. There is no option in the monitor, I wish it would do this, where it will tell you the refresh rate of whatever is being displayed on it. So I can't confirm that, but again, performance didn't seem to suffer at all when I was doing any of these various options. So now that I've covered the massive amount of adjustments this monitor has, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the gray area when it comes to this monitor. I usually split these into their own sections, but this monitor has a lot of upside paired with a potential downside, so that would be harder to actually split this apart without just covering the same ground over and over again. With that being said, let's start with the massive amount of customization this monitor has, which on one hand is great. And for those that enjoy it, you will get to geek out on all the small tweaks that this has and what that means for the look and the performance of this monitor. On the other hand, if you don't want to spend a lot of time adjusting your monitor, then this might drive you crazy. I've spent more time on this monitor than any other monitor I've reviewed, just trying to get it to look right in terms of the visuals and the performance that I personally prefer. Now I think I've finally found a good starting point for everyone, and I'll have my settings video out soon to help anyone frustrated by this process. It can feel overwhelming initially, and the presets this has just aren't that good in my opinion. I think Samsung knows that most people will adjust this to their liking anyways because it offers so many settings, so they just didn't try too hard to make any of these presets look good. As I've gotten the look down over time, I've enjoyed the monitor more, but initially I was actually quite disappointed that a $1,000 monitor didn't look amazing out of the box. I mean, the Pixio PXC277 Advanced monitor costs a fraction of the Neo G7 here, coming in at $239, and it looks way better out of the box. Now, it doesn't have anywhere near the amount of adjustments or features that this monitor has, but the fact that that much cheaper monitor just looks better when you pull it out, it was pretty much good to go when I set that monitor up, where I've spent an incredible amount of time just trying to finally nail down the look with this monitor. The HDR here is going to suffer from the same overwhelming amount of adjustments needed to get it to look good. Now, I will say that is more in line with all of the HDR monitors that I've used in the past, as there's always a lot of adjusting needed just to get HDR in general to look right. The local dimming is something you can use with or without HDR, and it does help with black levels looking closer to the true blacks that you find on an OLED. Now, earlier on in the video, I mentioned that I had to reach out to Samsung in order to get the amount of local dimming zones because they don't list this on the specs here, and they said it was 1196. Unfortunately, I do not have a way to actually confirm or test that. Visually, as I test this out in terms of just looking like, hey, how does it look when it's going from a light image to a dark image, and the glow that you kind of see around that, how does that look? It does appear to have a smaller amount of glow, which means there are more dimming zones around that. If you look at something where it only has like 16 local dimming zones, it'll highlight like a whole section of the monitor. This does not do that. You just see that glow just around the cursor. So we know that it is going to have at least a good amount to create that reduction in that glow around that cursor. Again, it would showcase like a whole section of the monitor if it was a smaller amount of local dimming zones. Now, once you do nail down the HDR, I think it looks pretty good on this monitor. It's not going to touch an OLED, but overall it looks pretty good. Now, this only has 600 nits for peak brightness, so it's not the 2000 you find on the smaller 32-inch Neo G7, but the whites here do get plenty bright, as 2000 nits to me seems like overkill. It's just way too bright. You would never have it at that full 2000 nits. Although it would be nice, at least on this monitor, especially with the size, if this was 1000 nits, because at this higher price point and this larger size, it just seems like they kind of cut a corner with that, with only making this 600 nits and not the full 1000. Playing games with HDR overall has been pretty good, even with the 600 nits. I think as an HDR experience, it's still pretty good with the local dimming zone option being turned on. Watching HDR content, on the other hand, is just kind of okay. So this isn't going to be very impressive next to an OLED in regards to the HDR or local dimming, but it will beat it in terms of peak brightness, as most OLEDs are only 200 to 350 nits with that peak brightness, which is one of the major downsides of them, outside of also any type of OLED burn-in that you could potentially get. Out of the box, playing the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X with HDR has been the best experience, and I think this is really the draw for this monitor, is you could connect the PC, you could connect the console, you can still watch TV, you just get all these various functions. It ends up being like a multimedia monitor, right? And so with that, just plugging in the PlayStation and playing Horizon Forbidden West, that looks incredible on this monitor just jumping right into it. And overall, I think that's been one of the better experiences on this monitor, both in terms of the HDR as a whole and then just all the other settings as well. The contrast, the brightness, just the game looks incredible in general. And I think it is just one of those games that really showcases how good this monitor can look. And I think if that experience transferred over to PC, I would be overall much happier with this monitor on the calibration side, since it just takes so long to actually fine tune that to get it to look right. But with that being said, being able to play on a console for a while and then just jump over and start watching some TV out of the 500 plus channels that they have, or to run an app that's installed on the TV like the YouTube or the Netflix app, or after that I need to jump over to my PC and I need to edit some videos, I start to see the appeal of this monitor, because this is really a multimedia monitor. You bring all of those things to this one device. And I think that's the appeal that everybody else is going to see that really want to get this monitor. Is, again, I could see it if it's in a game room or a dorm room. You get to bring all those things, and now I don't need a monitor for just my computer, because most of the time you don't want to run your computer on just a 4K monitor. It might not have the refresh rate that you want. It might have a very slow response time. There are those issues that you're going to find with it, where again, you get to bring everything to this monitor and put it all in the same location, and now it just makes things so much simpler and easier. Now, I did mention the response time that you find on a regular TV isn't that great. A lot of times it's, if you're even going to look at it as a motion picture response time, it's 4, 5, 6, maybe even higher, like 8 seconds. And so with that, you will notice a lot more ghosting in general on a TV, and that's if it can even hit the higher refresh rate. With this one, I will say it is better than any of those TVs that are like that, but it is probably the biggest disappointment and issue that people are going to have with this monitor. Now, my main monitor is the ROG PG42QU OLED, and that is ultra fast in terms of the response time. So you're looking at like 0.1 millisecond gray to gray response time for that monitor. Some are even faster. Some other OLEDs on the market, they're like 0.03 milliseconds. And that's because of these pixels being individually lit. It just has that much faster response time compared to any VA panel that you're going to see, which when you're looking at the UFO tests, most VA panels, you're going to see some level of ghosting there. It's just going to be that some have less than others. Again, compared to OLED, there's almost no ghosting when it comes to the UFO test, but VA panels seem to have this spectrum when it comes to the UFO test and the amount of ghosting that you see. And this one is going to be some of the worst ghosting that I've actually seen on a monitor, unfortunately. Now, I don't have the setup to do a proper trail pursuit of the UFO test, and regular video won't do it justice, but I will showcase a still from that video so you can just see how many UFO ghosts are trailing behind the main one. Now, for this still, I count 6, and when compared to the OLED, that one you're going to notice it doesn't have any, so it is very apparent the difference here. Going back to the Pixio monitor, it has a faster response time at 1 millisecond gray to gray when compared to the 1 millisecond motion picture response time that this monitor has. So this is another instance where the cheaper Pixio is better than the Neo G7. Looking at the ghosting trail on the Pixio, I count 4 compared to the 6 that you find on this Neo G7. I do want to point out that although these are stills, this is visually what you would see if you were running these tests and you were looking at it in person. So although I'm not using a trail pursuit camera setup, it still gives you a good idea of how these perform. At $1,000, this shouldn't have this much ghosting. Now again, this is going to be better than a regular TV on the performance side, even with the ghosting that it does have. But if you're comparing it to other OLEDs that are just TVs that gamers use as a PC monitor, like the LG C2, This can't compete with that. That's going to have a much faster response time. Again, you're almost going to see zero visible ghosting with that. So here, this just makes it feel, in terms of the performance, that this is a TV trying to be a monitor more so than a monitor with smart TV features. Moving on to those smart features, for those that don't care about the ghosting as much, maybe you play more adventure or slow-paced games that don't need a fast response time like first-person shooters, then these smart features here are an upside. The free cable this has access to alone can make it worth it for some people. Then again, the LG C2 OLED has a lot of these same features, but with a faster response time, amazing colors, more sizing options, and the 42-inch version is regularly on sale for the same price as the Neo G7. That is officially a TV though, so the game tab you find on the Neo G7 won't be there. A DP port for PC isn't on the C2, and not all of the panel settings will be the same. You also have the potential for OLED burn-in that you're not going to have on this VA panel. So at some point you are going to get OLED burn-in. Is that something that you're going to want to risk? With all of that being said, I do think this has plenty of smart features. Free cable TV with a large channel selection, a cool game tab if you plan on streaming games, screen mirroring from devices, you can stream your PC to this device if you set it up, and much more. It's these options that are going to be the big draw. It's these things that you just aren't going to get out of a regular PC monitor, and even some TVs like the LG C2. So this to me would be one of the main draws of this monitor. It's just this vast array of features. Last, I want to cover some loose ends with things most people will want to know. Blacklight bleed here is minimal with local dimming on high, but it will increase with that being turned to low or off. You do get to use local dimming regardless of whether or not HDR is turned on. Text clarity on the PC is okay here, but you will most likely want to run ClearType to help clean it up a little bit. The tilt and swivel on the monitor for the physical adjustments are okay, and most TVs don't even have that feature, but if you do want to mount this, I recommend the Ergotron HX monitor arm, as it can hold the weight of this monitor and it has the 200mm by 200mm VESA pattern with it. It's not a cheap monitor arm, but it will give you a wide range of adjustments if you need it. I suspect most people won't need that though, as you will set this in the exact spot you plan on using it. The speakers here get pretty loud and have a good amount of bass to them. I usually do a sound test for monitor speakers, but these get very loud and I don't think the quality is going to really translate. So the speakers are a big plus in my opinion, but this is another spec that Samsung doesn't list on their spec sheet for some reason. One website said they are 20-watt speakers. I never heard back from Samsung in time for the review on this one, but overall I do think these are quite good. The aesthetics here are more in line with the G9 monitors that have the white finish on them compared to the black finish the rest of the Odyssey series has, but personally I really like the look, and it's nice to see another white monitor, which are slowly becoming more common. Last, the remote works very well and is easy to use. I like the fact that you can actually recharge the battery with this remote also, which is a first for any TV or monitor I've ever used. It's a very nice touch and it fits the multimedia style this monitor has. Wrapping this video up, this is a massive mixed bag of good and bad here that I would want people to be aware of before purchasing this monitor. Things to consider here before purchasing. Are you okay with needing to spend a lot of time calibrating this potentially? Are you okay with the level of ghosting here? Do you plan on using the smart TV features or need the free cable channels this offers? And are any of the things you do need mentioned here something that you find on other options like the LG C2? Running through the list of things you're looking for in a monitor, just make sure you aren't going to be disappointed here. I would say for hardcore enthusiast PC gamers, this isn't going to be a monitor you would want to consider. For console gamers, this is a good option, and people who use their monitor as a multimedia hub, playing consoles, watching TV, streaming from your phone, or playing on a PC with all of those things, then I think this is going to be a good option for you. Now, one last thing to cover here is the price, and I've saved this till the very end because the price here has jumped all over the place. Now, normally this is $1,000. I got this for $800. I've seen the price as low as $700. And with this being a newly released monitor, that kind of to me seems troubling because usually you won't see these price breaks this early on. So either Samsung just isn't selling a ton of these, or they're having a lot of issues with production, or potentially just the monitor itself with people sending them back because they're having dead pixels or whatever it may be. Now, I'm happy to report there's been no issues with my monitor, but Samsung doesn't have the best track record when it comes to these monitors, just because every time I see one of these released, there's usually an issue with it, right? Whether it's the flickering that we had on the first G7 lineup, or some of the flickering issues that they had on the Neo G9. I haven't had anything like that with this monitor, but I could see it being an issue. I've not seen anything online either that is giving a massive report of this. What I really think is going on though is just sales are underperforming. They have too much stock. They need to get rid of them, so they've just cut the price on this. But that does mean that everybody can take advantage of that. So if you're looking around and you are currently in the market for a monitor, I do think that this is one to consider, just because the price here can be as low as $700. So if you're looking at an LG C2 or some of the other OLEDs that are coming out and they don't have all the features that you want potentially, or you do want to go with a VA panel or just a Samsung monitor, I think this is going to be a great option at that lower price point. I don't personally think it earns that $1,000 price point, but if you find it at $700, this to me is a really solid deal. So outside of the questions that I mentioned earlier that you would want to ask yourself before purchasing this, price is going to be a factor in that. And if you are a more like hardcore enthusiast PC gamer and you like fast-paced first-person shooters, at this lower price point, could you disregard the ghosting here and you get to enjoy the other features that this has compared to a regular monitor? Again, that's something also to consider, because at the sales price, again, I do think it is a good deal at $700 compared to paying the full price of $1,000, which I just don't think this is going to really be worth that $1,000 price point. So this has been the longest video review on a monitor I've done to date, just because this had so much to cover with it. But if there's anything that I left out, because I'm sure there is, let me know in the comment section if you have questions about that so that I can answer that for you there. If you do want to pick this monitor up, I will have it linked in the description, as well as some of the other monitors that I've reviewed in the past, so you can find all of that there. If you liked the video, hit the like button for me, as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.